Max had always been different, but he didn't know why. Born into a world of silence and darkness, he had no concept of what it meant to hear or see. To him, everything was a blur of shapes and sensations that he couldn't quite comprehend. He would wander the small room of the shelter, his nose leading the way, but always unsure of his surroundings. The constant clamor of other dogs barking, the sounds of visitors approaching, none of it mattered to Max. He had never known those sounds. Max's world was one of feeling. His nose, his paws, and his skin were his only means of understanding the world around him. But even that was often confusing. Other dogs would rush past him, knocking him off balance, or would avoid him altogether, sensing that he was different. There were times when Max would stand still, his body stiff, not knowing where to go or what to do next. His lack of sight and hearing left him feeling isolated, adrift in a world that didn't understand him. At the shelter, Max had learned to rely on his instincts. His days were monotonous, filled with hours of loneliness. The workers of the shelter would check on him, giving him food and water, but they didn't know how to reach him. He was just another animal, waiting for the right person to come along, but Max couldn't understand why no one seemed to want him. Each time a potential adopter would walk past his kennel, Max would wag his tail in hope, but it was always met with hesitation. The world outside the shelter was too overwhelming, too loud, too busy for a dog like him. He would sometimes feel the touch of a hand, someone reaching into his space to pet him, but even that felt strange. He couldn't hear the soothing words or the soft tones that usually accompanied a pat on the head. It made him unsure of whether it was something comforting or a signal to move away. Max had no idea how to communicate with people, and they seemed just as unsure of how to connect with him. Max didn't mind being alone. It was all he had ever known. He didn't dream of running in the park or playing fetch like the other dogs. Instead, his world was smaller. His sense of touch and smell were his only means of making sense of the environment, and sometimes he would retreat to a corner of his kennel, curling up into a ball, just waiting for time to pass. And yet, in his heart, a small flicker of hope remained. Max didn't know what he was waiting for, but there was a part of him that still believed, in his own quiet way, that one day things might be different. One chilly autumn afternoon, as the shelter grew quieter with fewer visitors, a small figure appeared by Max's kennel. It was Lily. She was no older than 10, with bright eyes full of curiosity and a gentle smile that seemed to shine even in the dim light of the shelter. Her parents were with her, but it was clear that Lily was the one leading the way. She had heard about Max from a school project on animal adoption, and something about his story tugged at her heartstrings. Unlike the others who hesitated, uncertain of how to approach a dog so different, Lily walked straight to Max's cage with a calm confidence. She didn't see a dog with disabilities. She simply saw a dog who needed a chance. She knelt down slowly in front of his kennel, making sure to give him space, not wanting to overwhelm him. Max, sensing her approach, lifted his head and sniffed the air, trying to catch a scent of the girl before him. He could feel the vibrations of her footsteps, the gentle rhythm of her movements, but he couldn't hear her soft voice or see her extended hand. Lily's heart swelled with compassion as she sat on the floor, her eyes fixed on Max's form. She could tell that he was confused, unsure of her presence, but she wasn't in a hurry. She didn't want to push him into anything. She knew that to connect with him, she had to be patient, just as he would need to be with her. Max, unsure of what to make of this new presence, took a cautious step forward. It was a slow, tentative movement, but it was enough for Lily to know that there was a chance for a connection. She smiled softly, and in her own quiet way, she spoke to him. "I'm here," Lily said gently, though Max couldn't hear her. "I won't hurt you." Max, feeling the warmth of her voice, even though he couldn't hear it, took another step. This time, his nose brushed the bars of the cage, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of calm. He had no idea who Lily was or what she wanted, but her presence felt safe, like the steady beat of a heart that would not abandon him. Max's instincts told him that this girl was different from the others. He could feel her kindness, her patience, and in that moment, Max began to trust her in a way he hadn't trusted anyone else. Lily extended her hand, though Max couldn't see it. She simply sat there waiting. She didn't rush him, didn't push him. All she wanted was for him to know that someone cared, that someone was there for him. Max leaned forward slightly, sniffing the air where her hand had been, feeling the warmth of her presence as if it were a beacon in the darkness. For the first time in a long while, Max felt something shift within him, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, his life could be different. Lily left the shelter that day with her heart full of hope and determination. She couldn't shake the thought of Max as she lay in bed that night, her mind racing with ways to help him. She had never seen a dog like him before, so isolated, so quiet, yet so full of potential. She had seen the fear in his eyes, but also a flicker of curiosity, as though he was searching for a connection but didn't know how to find it. The next morning, as Lily's parents made breakfast, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, researching everything she could about training dogs with disabilities. She read articles, watched videos, and even reached out to animal behaviorists. Lily's passion for helping Max only grew stronger as she learned more about his condition. Blindness and deafness in dogs were rare, but not impossible to manage. It would take time, patience, and dedication, but Lily was ready to give it all for him. That afternoon, after much persuasion, Lily's parents agreed to take her back to the shelter. They had seen how much she cared about Max, and they knew it was more than just a passing interest. This was something real, something deep inside her that she wasn't willing to let go of. When they arrived at the shelter, Lily rushed to Max's kennel. The moment she entered, she found him curled up in the corner, his nose resting on his paws. He didn't hear the door open or see her approach, but when she knelt down again, his body shifted ever so slightly. He could sense her there, the gentle energy she radiated. Lily smiled softly and sat down in the same spot where she had sat the day before. This time, instead of waiting for Max to approach, Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of chicken, his favorite treat. She set it on the floor just outside his cage, hoping that the smell would draw him in. She had read that dogs with disabilities often relied heavily on their sense of smell, and Max's keen nose would lead him to the food. Max's nose twitched at the familiar scent of chicken. He raised his head, eyes searching the air for the source of the smell. He had no idea where the food had come from, but his instincts told him to investigate. Slowly, he stood up and took a hesitant step toward the food. The sound of his paws clicking on the shelter floor seemed like thunder to him, but he focused all his attention on the treat. As he reached the edge of his kennel, he nudged the food with his nose and began to eat. Lily watched, holding her breath. This small moment of progress felt like a victory. Max was willing to trust her, even if it was just for a piece of chicken. She knew that this was just the beginning, but it was enough to fuel her resolve. She wasn't going to give up on him. She would do whatever it took to make sure he had a better life, a life filled with love, comfort, and the companionship he deserved. Lily left the shelter that day feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew there was still so much work to do, but for the first time, she truly believed that Max's world could change, and she was determined to be the one to help him make that change. Each day, Lily returned to the shelter to visit Max. She was unwavering in her commitment, determined to help him adjust to a new world filled with love and patience. With every visit, she worked harder to break down the invisible barriers that had separated Max from the world for so long. She didn't mind that it was slow. She knew that progress wasn't measured in quick moments, but in the small, steady steps they took together. Max was still unsure of her at times, his blind eyes not able to see her movements, his deaf ears unable to hear her voice. But he could feel her presence, and he could sense that she was different from the others who had come and gone in his life. There was something in the way Lily approached him, softly, gently, with no expectations other than to be there for him. She never pushed him, never demanded anything. Max could feel that she wasn't trying to change him, just to help him understand that he wasn't alone. One afternoon, Lily came prepared with something new. She had spent hours researching ways to communicate with Max, and she had learned about hand signals that could help him understand simple commands. It was an ambitious task, but Lily knew it was a necessary one. She would teach Max to respond to her touch and her gestures, and she was confident that it could be done, no matter how long it took. As soon as she entered the shelter, she approached Max's kennel with a calm and quiet demeanor. She stood in front of him and gently extended her hand toward his nose, letting him take in the scent of her touch. Max leaned forward, his nose brushing against her hand, and Lily could feel his hesitation, but she didn't pull away. She stayed still, waiting for him to decide that he could trust her again. After a moment, Max took a tentative step forward, nudging her hand once more. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with pride. This was a moment that meant more than any other. He wasn't just responding to her presence, he was making the choice to engage with her. Max was learning to trust again. Lily took a deep breath and slowly raised her other hand, moving it in a circular motion. She had read that this type of gesture could communicate a sense of calm and reassurance. Max, unsure of what to make of it at first, watched her hand closely. Slowly, he mirrored her movement, following the motion with his nose. Lily's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a command, not yet, but it was a promise that she would continue to guide him, one gesture at a time, until they found a way to communicate without words. She repeated the gesture, and this time, Max responded more confidently. The bond between them was growing stronger, and the silent promise that Lily had made to him, that she would never give up on him, was becoming a reality. As the days passed, Lily and Max made slow but steady progress. Each moment felt like a victory, no matter how small. And Lily knew, deep in her heart, that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long, but they would walk it together. And with every step, Max's world, once silent and dark, would become just a little brighter. The journey wasn't easy. Each day presented new obstacles that tested Lily's patience, determination, and creativity. Max couldn't hear her voice, and he couldn't see the world around him. The challenge of training a blind and deaf dog seemed impossible at times, but Lily refused to back down. She knew she was fighting for something far greater than just training, a connection, a life for Max that was full of love and security. Lily's days were now filled with research and practice. She learned everything she could about how to communicate with dogs using just touch, movement, and scent. She reached out to trainers who specialized in dogs with disabilities, scoured books and online forums, and even watched videos of other owners training blind and deaf dogs. Slowly, she began to piece together a plan that might work for Max. Every afternoon after school, Lily would visit the shelter. She arrived with a sense of purpose and a pocket full of treats, prepared to try new techniques with Max. She started small, using simple hand gestures to help Max understand basic commands. She would tap lightly on the ground with her finger to get his attention, and then she'd show him a hand movement to guide him into a new position or action. For example, she would gently guide his nose toward her palm, and then slowly move her hand to the side to direct him in a circle. Max, at first, was confused. His eyes couldn't see the signals, and his ears couldn't hear the commands. But Lily was patient, repeating the motions until Max began to catch on. She had learned that dogs, even those without sight or hearing, are incredibly perceptive to touch and scent. Max may not have understood the world in the same way other dogs did, but he could still feel the movements of her hands and sense the way her presence made him feel safe. One day, after weeks of repetition, something incredible happened. Max, as if he suddenly understood the rhythm of Lily's gestures, followed her hand in a smooth, graceful circle. He had done it. Lily's heart raced with excitement as she knelt down to praise him. She knew this was more than just a trick. It was a breakthrough. Max was learning to trust her movements, to feel the world around him through the delicate language they had begun to build. But there were still many more hurdles to overcome. Training wasn't just about getting Max to respond to commands. It was about showing him that he had a place in the world, that he wasn't just a blind and deaf dog in a corner of the shelter, but a dog who could thrive and connect with others. Lily's work was far from over. She knew she had to help Max gain confidence in every part of his life. It wasn't just about the training, it was about helping him navigate the world, teaching him to trust the people around him, and giving him the tools to feel secure in a world that had never made sense to him. Every day, Lily's bond with Max deepened. Each new skill learned, each breakthrough, was a reminder that no challenge was too big when love and determination were involved. Weeks passed, and Lily's determination never wavered. She continued to visit Max every day, working tirelessly to bridge the gap between them. She could see the changes in him, though they were subtle. Max no longer seemed as fearful or uncertain. He would cautiously approach her hand, sniffing it as if trying to understand the new world she was introducing him to. His movements became less hesitant, more purposeful. He was starting to learn the rhythm of their communication. One particular afternoon, Lily arrived at the shelter feeling hopeful. She had spent the morning practicing with Max at hand signals and had come up with new ways to help him understand basic commands. As she knelt down to his kennel, Max was already waiting by the bars, his nose twitching in the air as if he could sense her presence even before she entered. It was a small thing, but it felt like a sign that Max was beginning to recognize her in ways he never had before. Lily smiled as she extended her hand toward him. This time, she added a new gesture, an upward motion with her palm, one that she had been practicing for days. It was meant to signal Max to stand up. She moved slowly, making sure to give him enough time to process each movement. Max tilted his head slightly, his nose gently brushing her hand as he tried to make sense of what was happening. For a moment, he hesitated, uncertain of what to do. But then, as if something clicked in his mind, Max stood up on his own. His movements were cautious but steady, and Lily couldn't help but let out a soft gasp of surprise. It wasn't just that Max had responded to her signal. It was the way he had done it, with a newfound confidence that Lily hadn't seen before. Max was starting to trust her guidance, starting to understand that she wasn't just a random figure in his life, but a constant presence who would always be there. His trust in her was growing, and in that moment, Lily knew that they were closer than ever to truly understanding one another. She gently praised him, her voice soft and full of warmth. Though Max couldn't hear her, he could feel the vibration of her hand against his side, the gentle touch of affection that signaled his success. Lily's heart swelled with pride. She had known from the beginning that it wouldn't be easy, but seeing Max take this first real step toward independence filled her with a sense of accomplishment she could hardly describe. For the next few days, Lily continued to work with Max, reinforcing the upward motion to help him stand, as well as introducing other simple gestures. Each day brought a new challenge, but also a new victory. Max's progress was slow, but with each breakthrough, Lily felt the bond between them grow stronger. It wasn't just about training, it was about building trust and understanding, and the more they worked together, the more she realized just how much potential Max had. It was a quiet, powerful moment of connection. Max had taken the first real step toward freedom, and Lily had been the one to guide him there. And in that moment, the world seemed a little bit brighter for both of them. As the weeks turned into months, Max began to flourish in ways that Lily had only dreamed of when she first set out on this journey. The transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Where once Max had been a quiet, withdrawn dog in a world full of noise and confusion, he was now a confident companion, still navigating his silent, dark world, but doing so with a new sense of purpose and joy. Each day, Max's understanding of his surroundings grew. Lily's bond with him had deepened to a level that was beyond simple training. They had become a team, communicating in ways that only they fully understood. Max had learned to respond to the subtle gestures Lily had taught him, and she had perfected the art of guiding him through his world, whether it was leading him on walks around the shelter or helping him navigate the yard. At first, Max had been hesitant about walking with Lily. His cautious steps had been slow, unsure, and unsteady. But now, as Lily held his leash, Max walked confidently beside her, his head held high. He no longer stumbled as much or froze at unfamiliar sounds. Instead, he moved with purpose, using his sense of smell to guide him, his paws finding their place on the ground as if he were rediscovering a world he had once thought was unreachable. Lily could feel the subtle difference in the way Max moved beside her. He was no longer the dog who would pause, unsure of his next step. He was taking the lead, trusting that Lily would always be there to guide him if he needed her. In the yard, Max's confidence grew even more. Lily introduced him to toys, simple, soft balls and ropes. At first, Max had shown little interest, unsure of what they were or how to play with them. But with time, he began to associate the toys with fun. He would nudge the balls with his nose, paw at the ropes, and even play tug-of-war with Lily. These moments were a revelation. Max was no longer just existing, he was living. He was enjoying life in a way he had never been able to before. The other dogs of the shelter were still around, but Max no longer felt like an outsider. He had found his place. He wasn't just the blind and deaf dog in the corner anymore. He was Max, a dog with personality, with quirks, and with a growing sense of independence. The shelter staff began to notice the change in him, marveling at how far he had come since Lily first arrived. They often watched in awe as Max followed Lily's signals or played happily in the yard, a far cry from the withdrawn dog he had once been. Lily, too, felt a shift within herself. The journey had been long, full of challenges and setbacks, but the rewards were beyond anything she could have imagined. Every time Max responded to her touch, every time he learned a new skill, Lily felt a rush of pride. This wasn't just about helping a dog with disabilities. It was about building a deep, unbreakable bond. She wasn't just training him, she was giving him a new life. Max's transformation didn't just change him, it changed Lily too. She had proven to herself that love and patience could overcome even the most difficult of challenges. Max had taught her the true meaning of perseverance, and together they had created a world where, no matter how silent or dark it seemed, there was always room for hope and love. And as they walked together through the shelter's yard, Lily knew that this was only the beginning of a beautiful journey. It was a sunny spring morning when Lily's family received a call from the shelter. The voice on the other end was familiar, one of the shelter workers who had seen Max's transformation from the very beginning. They were calling with incredible news. Max had found a forever home. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had known that Max's journey had been about more than just training or therapy. It had been about building a bond, helping him find his place in the world. But to know that he had finally found a family who would love him as much as she did filled her with an indescribable sense of pride and joy. The shelter worker explained that a couple looking to adopt a dog with special needs had recently come in. They had seen Max's story, and they wanted to meet him. After spending some time with him and watching the way he responded to Lily's signals, they knew that Max was the perfect dog for their family. Lily felt a mix of emotions. She was overjoyed that Max would have the chance to live in a loving home, but there was also a deep, bittersweet feeling. She had spent so many months working with him, watching him grow and thrive, that the thought of letting him go was difficult. But she knew it was the right thing to do. Max had made incredible progress, and it was time for him to move on to the next chapter of his life. Lily had helped him find his way back into the world, and now it was time for someone else to continue that journey with him. On the day of Max's adoption, Lily arrived at the shelter early. She wanted to spend one last moment with him before he left. When she entered the kennel, Max was waiting, his tail wagging slowly as he sensed her presence. He was no longer the unsure dog he had been when they first met. He had grown so much, and Lily could see the transformation in his eyes. He was no longer scared or alone. He was confident, happy, and ready for his new life. Lily knelt down in front of Max, her hand gently brushing his fur. She gave him a soft, reassuring smile, feeling the weight of the moment. She had given him everything she could, and now it was time for him to take the next step on his own. She signed a simple command with her hand, and Max responded immediately, his body language relaxed and trusting. "You're going to be okay," Lily whispered, though she knew Max couldn't hear her. But she knew he could feel the sincerity in her touch, the love in her heart. When Max's new family arrived, they were overjoyed to meet him. The couple who had been searching for a dog with special needs immediately connected with Max. They had prepared their home for him, and they understood that caring for a blind and deaf dog required patience, but also a deep, unconditional love. As Max left the shelter with his new family, Lily stood by, watching them walk away. Her heart was heavy but full of pride. She had given him the tools he needed to succeed, and she had shown him what it meant to trust, to love, and to live. Max was no longer the dog locked away in silence and darkness. He was a dog with a bright future, surrounded by people who would cherish him. For Lily, the journey had come to an end, but she knew it was only the beginning for Max. She had helped him find his place in the world, and she would always remember the quiet bond they shared. The bond that had turned a blind, deaf dog into a thriving, happy companion. As Lily walked out of the shelter that day, she looked up at the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She had given everything for Max, and in return, he had shown her the true power of patience, love, and belief. And with that, she knew she had made a difference, not just in Max's life, but in her own as well.